How should you improvise a fighting scene? First, you always want to start with the stakes. Why should your character fight, and who should she fight? Remember that a combat or a fight is not necessarily a physical combat. There are two main questions you need to consider every time you learn. Should your character allocate time to this fight, and should she make use of violence? Depending on the situation, your character will be more flexible, more progressive. For example, in an exploring type of situation, if your character is investigating, she's negotiating, she is trying to discover a new territory, a new resource, or maybe a new character, she may be more flexible, less rigid, less direct, less physical. That's our first main situation. Our second main situation is saving. Now, your character has to think in terms of opportunity here, even more so than in the two other situations. Should your character allocate time to this situation? Should she try to save this person? Is she worth saving? Now, here, saving may mean fighting someone, because this person is not doing what she needs to herself. By opposition with our third situation, which is stopping. In this case, you're not trying, your character, are not trying to stop someone in order to save her. You're trying to stop someone because she poses a threat to a larger group. So here, you're really trying to thwart the plan of an individual because she is a threat to a group. Now, which means will you use? How will they be appropriate? How will they be proportionate? You can add more depth to the question of stakes by taking care of the situation of alignment and affinity. Now, as a reminder, alignment is a matter of organizations, a matter of group, a collective matter. Affinity is an individual matter. It allows you to quantify the proportion of two characters to form an alliance at an individual level. Now, alignment and affinity group the same reality. There will be opposition, and what you want to define here, what you want to predict, is the propension that two characters have to oppose themselves or to ally. The two characters would oppose at some point will depend on their first encounter. The first encounter, the place where the characters met each other, and the event for which they met each other will define if these characters are likely to oppose each other or likely to ally with each other, allowing you to predict the different fights, the different combat, the different phase of crisis and disagreement. You also want to define to which kind of organizations this character may belong to. Now, if you don't have clear organizations in your world, you can define what kind of rules, what kind of system, what kind of thematics or of mission that they fix to themselves. Because now it will allow you to predict the different kind of opposition or the different kind of synergies that these characters will have with other characters that will form relationships with. The logic which applies at the organizational level applies at the individual level as well. Now, the scale is a differentiation factor. But at the individual level, the evolution of a character will become probably more predictable since it depends on only the character's identity. Now, what does it mean in terms of conflict, in terms of fight? Every time your character is going through a crisis or even through the climax phase, so every time your character is likely to meet another character, or every time your character is likely to join an organization or a faction, even indirectly, her affinities and her alignment are likely to change. So crises make your character evolve. And crises are the moment where your character is likely to enter into the starkest type of conflict, which is why crisis will define your character's evolution, whether it is in a term of identity or behavior. A fight is the occasion to define your character's quirks. The first kind of quirks here are the weapons. Weapons are items, therefore they're built, they have origins, they have a role, a function. So if you want to make use of the weapon to define, for example, your character's silhouette, and to display this weapon as your character's symbol, make use of the role of the weapon, the function of the weapon, and who built this weapon in order to make it a highly symbolic object, whether it's during the combat phase or outside the combat phase. Weapons are objects, they're items, so they have properties. What are the proportions of your weapon? Is it easy to use? What are the ergonomics of your weapon? And is it resilient? Is it resistant? How can your weapon be used, and to which extent? The versatility of a weapon will define the flexibility of what your character can do in a fight. Finally, you want to give your weapon movesets. Now, you may want to go for a fancy moveset, but really 6 types of moves are sufficient. 6 types of moves are enough for a main character, because if it's for a secondary or a tertiary character, you can give your weapon less move. 6 is diverse enough so that the public don't get bored and the character can have multiple solutions, but also 6 is just enough for the public to remember most of them. More than 6 moves in a singular weapon, knowing that all of your character in an action type of story, in an adventure type of story, in a horror type of story, wherever your character are fighting, almost every character is guaranteed to have a weapon, so every time the public will have to remember all the new movesets. You want to reduce it to the minimum. And this minimum here is created by this balance. You want enough moves to give your character enough flexibility to resolve the situation, even if they are not combat situations sometimes. And you don't want to put too much so the public may remember them. The other kind of fighting quirks are the fighting styles. Now, styles are quite similar to weapon in the sense that your character will have multiple type of representation of the style or techniques here, which corresponds directly to movesets. So again, 6, because it's not too much for the public to remember, is it just enough for your character to be able to manage multiple kind of situation. Now, the style are slightly different from weapon in that they're directly integrated in your character's body. So they should translate your character's behavior and to some extent their identity, in that they will translate your character's strengths and your character's weaknesses. Also, the characterizing element in that they're supposed to define or to be defined by the rhythm of your character. Is your character slow when she moves, when she talks? Is she fast? Is she in between? Is she brutal? Is she progressive? Style, fighting style, will allow you to define your character's identity. If you're going a lot of graphic elements in your books, even more so if you're doing a movie or a game, remember that gesture is the first step to representing anything graphically. So here, the creating styles, creating custom position, custom gesture, custom expression for your character is one of the best way to characterize her. A fight should factor the environment. You want to take advantage of the environment to create more diversity in your fighting scenes, in your fighting chapters, or even in your whole stories if you're organizing a tournament, for example. Now, every time your character are going through a new environment, a new setting, a new arena, the climate will change, the constraints will change, the duress will change. Maybe your atmosphere is full of toxin, maybe it's acidic. The type of climate transcribed here by the colors of the environment and the excitation of different type of senses will be critical when it comes to creating diversity in your fighting scenes. You want your character to be able to improvise their way out of the fight through the environment, because your character may be willing to fight, but let's say that most characters are not willing. They fight because they have to. They want to fight their way out of this situation as fast as possible. So they'll need to take advantage of the environment in order to shorten the conflict, especially if they're in a duress type of situation. Now, the weaponry inherent, the organic weaponry of the environment should be taken care of. But that's only possible if your character is able to see it. Same thing for the elevation and the geography in the environment. Your character should be able to take advantage of it in terms of creating traps, creating spaces of safety. The whole survival aspect is revealed, is displayed through the manipulation of the environment by your character in order to gain advantage on your opponent. Finally, your environment will have inhabitants. Your environments will have maybe settlements, or they will be populated by ferals. Now, whichever the case, whichever there are humanoids or non-humanoids, non-sentient, non-sapient species in your environment, there should be always a case for a third party to come into the fight. So your character is opposing another character. It may be on an individual level, it may be on an organizational type of fight, you know, and there can always be a third party to get into the fight. You know, if you want more intense fight, add danger. Your two fighters are opposing each other, they're straining each other, they're tiring each other. Okay, a giant elephant comes into the fight. Now what happens? Now you've got everything. The stakes, the alignments, the relationships, the weaponry, the styles, the environments, the different kind of other third party that can interrupt the fight. Now, what's the point of all that? Diversity. You want to create a diversity of encounters. Now, how can you add yet another layer of diversity? Now you have all these options, and how do you create even more diversity? Well, simply by diversifying the type of encounters. Now, your character may be fighting a crowd. No, it may be a situation of crowd control, or it may be a single opponent. Now, it may be a weak opponent, an opponent that may need the help of your character because she can't think by herself. Or it can be a strong opponent, character that doesn't necessarily mean hostility, but that's facing your character to test herself. Here, weak and strong does not mean weak and strong physically. No, it's a general assessment. You know, it's weak and strong physically and mentally. It's a mean here. Now, your characters may be fighting mixed group as well. You know, mixed encounter are a great way to create a surprise. Try to mix and match the type of species in your world, the type of opponent, possible opponent. It may be even two rival organizations that are now gathering to fight your character. And it may be a surprising encounter, because these two groups should normally be enemies, and now they're fighting your character as one force. The type of diversity may also come from the outcome. No, an unusual outcome. Well, say in another manner, the outcome in which you do not have to terminate a target, in which you do not have to kill, for example. An outcome for which sometimes you'll need to recruit your target, or you need just to capture the target, but nothing else. It may be surprising enough. Now, where does that apply? Let's say that your character has met the character that she now have to recruit or to capture through this fight early in the story. But early in the story, this character does not seem so adversarial. She does not seem to be hostile. And as the story grows, as crises accumulate, as pain accumulate, now your character has to recruit her, whether it's willingly, so to become a part of her own team, or more as a mean to resolve a larger conflict, because this character has a specific skill. That's an unusual outcome. last thing you want to consider for a more traditional outcome, but put in another way, is neutralization. So now we're about to terminate another individual. That would be the mission of your character in this situation. That would be why your character is fighting here. So how do you put a twist on that? Again, by the first encounter. Depending on the initial relationship between your two characters, the neutralization will be more or less willful. It will be more or less painful. That's how you put a twist on neutralization, by focusing on the first encounter. If you like this video, know that we're highly likely to produce more of this type of content. Also, if you have a specific demand, engage with us in the comments. What would you want more of? What should be done differently? And how should it be done according to you? Also, if you enjoyed this piece of content, you may be interested in this other video. Suggest us the content you need. This channel is made for you.